c'est intention de vote serré. Donc, madame, monsieur, ou branché Pistars FM Radio-Télévision, dans le cadre activité qui marquait déroulement élection présidentielle année 2024, élection générale américaine, c'est pour 5 novembre, donc nous à Jouzi, moins 1 pour nous entrer dans le moment ça qui pourra marquer une autre fois encore l'histoire des États-Unis, mais qui a aussi gagné impact sur l'histoire reste monde là. Parce que ça qui passe ici, il peut arrêter ici aux États-Unis. États-Unis tout c'est, eh bien, il y a un autre pays dans le monde là qui est malade. Ça veut dire que décision autorité américaine prend, lui fait impact sur notre pays. Décision que citoyen américain prend, lui fait impact sur notre pays, surtout dans le cadre déroulement élection. Qui leader que vous mettez dans la Maison Blanche là, qui monde que vous mettez en dedans congrès, qui pour légiférer, il a gagné importance énorme sous non seulement citoyens pays, mais sous un pile citoyen à travers planète Terre là, considérer relation États-Unis avec un bon autre pays, États-Unis comme pays riche par rapport à d'autres qui c'est pays moyen ou bien même si c'est pays riche même avec lui, pas parler pour ça considéré comme pays pauvre. Donc élection ça, livre dit en pile bagaille à ou même pour choisir. Est-ce que vous chita la caillou? Est-ce que vous fait plan déjà pour aller voter? Est-ce que vous fait plan jeudi pendant l'église là ou passer dans le bureau de vote là pour déposer bulletin par là? Moi connais que n'est pas facile parce que je dis qui ces derniers jours early voting non, il y a un pile monde qui préféré à voter jeudi parce que yo pas capable de faire le travail mardi. Et c'est là gros débat qui vient pour que yo te ba jou ça comme un jour férié, un jour congé pour moun te capable gagner possibilité en toute quiétude, yo pas pour un jour travail. Côté ça gouvernement pas qu'à décider. Pour qui ça ou pas veut décider pour bay américain yo l'attitude, largesse pour que yo capable à voter sans inquiétude pour un jour travail. Nous trouvons ça les dur et que pour parlementaires yo pas capable légiférer pour dire OK, la journée électorale, la journée présidentielle électorale américaine, li pral un jour férié que tout le monde a touché. Moun qui t'a travaillé, y a payé yo. Y a payé yo. C'est ta meilleure décision, pas dire simple, mais c'est ta meilleure décision que autorité yo t'es capable de prendre dans tête collée. En tout cas, on peut mettre tout en débat là.
To Donald Trump. And the only thing his tax cuts did back then was to help folks that were already doing good and drive up the deficit in the meantime. Trump's other big idea is to slap a tariff on everything from food to TVs. Now, almost every economist who has looked at this idea says that won't lower prices, that makes prices higher. And when he's challenged on this point, Trump will brag about, well, look at gas prices. They were $2 a gallon when I was in office. You know why gas was so cheap? Because there was a global lockdown during COVID and nobody was driving. And he's talking about it like it was the good old days. I want us to remember that. Yes, gas was super cheap because we were stuck inside the house. Nobody was buying gas. So then I'll hear people say, well, at least Donald Trump sent me a check during the pandemic. Now, y'all have heard this. I guarantee you some of you have heard this from somebody. So I want to clear this up as well. At the start of COVID, Democrats and Republicans joined together to send out emergency checks. Tammy was there. And you know what? Joe Biden worked with Congress and sent out an emergency check during the pandemic. Just like I worked with Congress to give people emergency relief during the Great Recession. There was not anything unique about what Donald Trump did, except, unlike Joe Biden and me, He put his name on the check as a marketing tool. I'd never thought of that. For me, for Joe Biden, it was not about taking credit and advancing our politics and feeding our egos. It was about helping people during tough times. So, the point is, for those of you who are still making up your minds out there, do not give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt because he was on a reality show. And certainly do not give him credit for an economy that he inherited. There is only one candidate who has offered serious ideas about how to drive down prices and make this economy work for everybody, and that is Kamala Harris. She's going to go after corporations that unfairly jack up prices. She's got detailed plans to work with local governments and the private sector to build 3 million new affordable homes all across America and then help first-time home buyers with their down payments. She's going to give a tax cut to 100 million middle-class and working Americans, helping small businesses get started, helping first-time parents with the basic costs of having a child. Now let's talk about health care. If you ask Donald Trump what he's going to do to make health care more affordable, he's got one answer, and that is repeal the Affordable Care Act. And he's not by himself. The other day, the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said there would be, quote, no Obamacare if Trump wins. Now, do not boo. Don't. Now, neither of them can really explain why they want to end it, except for the fact that I did it. The problem they have is, guess what? The Affordable Care Act works. Almost 50 million people have gotten health care because of it. Another 50 million have the security of knowing insurance companies can't deny them coverage because of a pre-existing condition. The more people benefit, the more popular it has become.
Président Barack Obama a fait campagne pour Mme Kamala Harris dans Wisconsin, qui a détaillé programme politique économique réussite que a gagné depuis l'administration là jusqu'à l'administration Biden-Harris là. Après que il était venu tomber alors avant, c'était l'administration Donald Trump là qui est venu passer là by Joe Biden, mais dans une période cruciale côté que le pays a vu en bas COVID-19.
What? Donald Trump spent his entire presidency trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, trying to tear it down, and he couldn't even do that right. And now, 8 years after he was elected, he was asked, well, if you did repeal it, what would you replace it with? And he looked, and he kind of fumbled around, and they said, well, I've got concepts of a plan for how to replace it. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Let's say your boss gives you an assignment, says, I need it by Friday. Friday rolls around. Your boss comes up to you, says, did you finish that project for me? You say, well, actually, I haven't started, but I do have a concept of a plan. Or you could try it at home. Honey, did you do the dishes? You throw out the trash? I've been watching this football game, but I do have a concept of a plan to do the dishes. How's that going over? You're on the couch. If it would not work for you, why should it work for the President of the United States? It shouldn't. The good news is Kamala Harris doesn't have concepts of a plan. She has actual plans to limit out-of-pocket health care costs, to keep lowering prescription drug prices. And Kamala Harris understands the threat to women's health that has been posed by the decision of Donald Trump's Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. Since then, we have seen effective abortion bans in 20 states. Infant mortality rates have begun to tick up. Doctors are afraid to provide potential life-saving treatment to at-risk mothers. I've always said, I respect those who, for religious or ethical reasons, would not consider terminating their own pregnancy. But if nothing else, freedom must surely mean that women themselves get to make these profoundly intimate decisions, not politicians. And that's why, if Congress passes a bill to restore the reproductive freedom that women had for nearly 50 years and that Donald Trump bragged about taking away, Kamala Harris will sign it into law.
Barack Obama en campagne pour camp démocrate là dans Wisconsin du côté de Milwaukee particulièrement. N'a pas rappelé ces puissances de FM radio télévision.
Not concepts of a plan, actual plans to make your lives better, to protect your freedoms. Now, whenever Donald Trump is challenged on his lack of plans, on the economy or health care or anything else, he will fall back on his favorite issue, and that is immigration. According to Trump, it does not matter what the issue is. Health, housing, crime, a lost pet. If you just let him round up whoever he wants, ship them out, all your problems will be solved. America will be great again. So let's talk about immigration for a second. A lot of folks have legitimate concerns about what's happening at our borders. It is critical that the next president work with Democrats and Republicans to make sure our borders are orderly and secure. We are a nation of immigrants. We are also a nation of laws. And we have to make sure that those two things work together. But, you know, whenever the issue of immigration comes up, Donald Trump likes to say it's Kamala Harris's fault. She's been vice president for 4 years. Why didn't she fix it? Wasn't Donald Trump president for 4 years? Why didn't he fix it? If rounding up and deporting millions of desperate people is the answer to everything, why was the number of undocumented immigrants basically the same when Donald Trump left office as when he took office? Think about that. I'll tell you why. Because Donald Trump doesn't have a real plan to solve immigration. He's got a concept of a plan, and it's a mean and ugly concept. You know what would actually bring order to the border and fix our immigration system? The bipartisan deal that Kamala Harris supported, even though it was written by one of the most conservative Republicans in Congress, Donald Trump, on the verge of the vote, told Republicans not to vote for it. Because his mindset was, I want this issue to run on. I want to be able to fear-monger. That's how I'm going to win this election. That's how he was thinking. We do not need a president, Wisconsin, who will make problems worse just to make their politics better. We need a president who cares about solving problems and making your life better. And that's what Kamala Harris will do. And to help her do it, she's going to need a Senate full of public servants like Tammy Baldwin. Tammy spent her career fighting for things like good jobs and affordable health care and medication and personal freedom. She knows how to make a difference. She has proved she can make a difference. Remember how the Affordable Care Act lets young people stay on their parents' health care plan until they're 26? Tammy wrote that part of the bill. She knew it was important to Wisconsin families. That's the kind of workhorse and not show horse that we need in Washington. That's the kind of person who's going to help get Kamala in office and help Kamala get stuff done. Somebody who shares our values. Somebody who wants to move this country forward and not back. Yeah, she's really good. Tammy's legit. Now, there's one last thing I hear from undecided voters, and this, I'll be honest with you, may be the toughest answer. Toughest answer. They'll tell me that at the end of the day, from their perspective, politicians are all the same. They make empty promises, regardless who ends up being the next president. It's not really going to make a difference in their lives. And I know you've heard that from friends, neighbors, coworkers. And I think we can all understand why people might feel that way. You know, if you live in a small town in rural Wisconsin and you saw the plant close down and jobs get shipped overseas and young people start moving away because they don't feel like they've got a fair shot at advancement, you're going to feel skeptical about government being able to bring about real change. If you live in a neighborhood in Milwaukee where gun violence and the drug trade are a fact of life, and parents are scared about their kids just getting to and from school, you're going to feel the same way. So if that's your perspective, I want to be honest. Politics, you're right, politics is not going to solve all of your problems. No matter how well-meaning a president might be, he or she is not going to get rid of poverty or eliminate racism in one term or two. No president's going to reverse every long-term economic trend. They can't make sure your boss doesn't act like a jerk or make your kids listen to you when they're doing something stupid. But what government can do is make your life a little better. A president who's serious and who cares about you can make it a little easier for you to afford a home, a little easier for you to pay for your medicine, make it a little easier to send your kid to college or to get him an apprenticeship in a trade. And those small measures of improvement over time add up. And the flip side is a bad president, a president who does not see you, who does not care about you, can make your life a little bit harder. And that adds up too. When I was president, I did not solve all the problems of our healthcare system. But just this week, while I was visiting a campaign volunteer office in Maryland, 3 people separately, unprompted, came up and told me how the ACA had protected their families during a serious illness. One woman comes up and she says, "You saved my son's life." Now, I promise you, every single one of you here, somebody you know has health care because of the Affordable Care Act. And it did not solve every problem, but it's made a difference. It's provided people with some security, and I could not have done that without your vote. Now, I will give you the opposite example. When I was president, we had to deal with Ebola and H1N virus, and so I started really studying issues of pandemic, and I called my team together in my second term, and I said, we need to put together a playbook for how to deal with pandemic, the same way we have a playbook for how to deal with natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, et cetera. What are we going to do? And so we put together the playbook, we called together all the agencies, sat them down, we ran what are called tabletop exercises to practice how are we going to deal with the state public health systems, what are we going to do with the schools, what kinds of travel restrictions might be put in place, how do we accelerate vaccines, had it all in this big book. And so when Donald Trump comes in, I hand it to him. Where's the book? I handed it to him, and apparently it was lost. And 3 years later, a pandemic hits. Now, I want to be fair on this. No matter who was president, the pandemic was going to be a terrible crisis. People were going to get sick. People were going to die. But if you look at a country like Canada, their per capita death rate, think about this, their per capita death rate was 60% lower than in the United States. Now, over 1 million people died during the pandemic here in the U.S., so do the math. 60% of 1 million people is 600,000 people. That's somebody's grandparent. That's somebody's parent. That's somebody's husband or wife. That's somebody's coworker, somebody's friend that might be alive if we had had a competent president who was focused on dealing with the crisis instead of wondering whether we could treat COVID by injecting bleach into our arms. So if somebody tells you this election does not matter, tell them respect. That having a president who understands policy and is willing to put in the work does matter. And for those of you who, even after they hear that, are still undecided, let me tell you what else matters. Values matter. Character matters. A president makes 1 million decisions. And most of the time, they're judgment calls. The easy decisions, the obvious decisions get made by somebody else. The hard ones are what gets to the president's desk. And you can't anticipate every issue that's going to come down the pipe. And so it's really important. Does that person have a moral compass? Do they have some integrity? Are they focused on doing what's right by the American people? Values matter. Some of you know that when I was growing up, I didn't have a father in the house, but I did have people around me. Stepfather, grandparents, teachers, coaches, most of all my mom, who taught me the difference between right and wrong. Who showed me what it meant to have integrity, to be honest, to be responsible, to work hard, to treat other people the way I wanted to be treated. Now, there were times where I did not perfectly live up to those values, especially when I was a teenager. But as I got older, I internalized those values. I tried to live up to them. Not perfectly, but I knew they were important, and I wanted to be that person. And I suspect most of you grew up the same way. And one of the most disturbing things about this election, not just this election, but Trump's entire rise in politics, you can see it just pervading our political culture, is how we seem to have just set aside those values that we were taught.
Président Barack Obama qui en campagne dans Wisconsin, État pour Mme Kamala Harris, qui a détaillé le programme économique, contrairement à la promesse que Donald Trump fait, réalisation ligne. Barack Obama a rappelé que ce n'est pas de travail M. Trump, mais c'est des préférences de l'administration avant lui qui a quitté le pays avec un supplément économique que M. même lui gaspillé alors que les États-Unis n'ont dette 4,3 trillions de dollars après tout ça quitté dépensé déjà. On a tourné un peu plus tard pour nous capoter pour l'autre activité campagne. Mme Harris était dans Pennsylvania, mais c'est l'église Italie. Il va aller dans Wisconsin, State Battleground, côté qui est 7 environ. Madame Kamala Harris disposé passer temps là-dedans pour que li arrive convaincre population pour voter en faveur pendant ça les victimes parce que elle ta cousin là État Nebraska qui tombé côté que monsieur li gagné un bonbon de gaz yo dit la cali qui explosé et c'est pas n'importe qui mais chaque Jérôme son qui utile Haïti en pile qui porte la couleur d'Haïti sous doli à travers sélection nationale nous souhaiter collègues nous souhaiter camarades nous citoyens pays nous souhaiter le courage et bon établissement yo apprendre nous que c'est état de santé monsieur avec madame ni qui plus grave c'est ça qui plus grave dans incident ça qui est là vendredi dans la cour Nebraska selon information dans chercher pour nous plus de détails pour si nous voir quelqu'un qui est autorisé parler pour compatriote là pour t'a dit nous dans qui état monsieur qui côté monsieur exactement est-ce qu'il a retourné dans Cali